Today I'm going to talk about some of the brain science behind good practicing and how to make your practicing more efficient. If you like this video, be sure to share it with anybody who you think might be able to improve their practicing and become more efficient by seeing this. And subscribe to see all the new videos that come out every Saturday with lots of great clarinet information. So what is practicing and why do we have to practice? The reason why we practice is mainly to learn new things and to feel confident and comfortable when we're performing. So the way to do that is by doing a lot of repetitions of it, basically. That's on the most fundamental level, and you probably know this, but practicing is just doing a lot of repetitions so that you build it into your muscle memory and can do it consistently and confidently. Now, there are better and worse ways of doing this. I think a lot of people, when they practice, and this was especially me in elementary school and most of high school, to be honest, I would have a piece of music that I was going to practice. I pull out my music and I start playing it, and I go through it. If anything was hard or like I made mistakes, I would do it again, but just like a couple times and then just keep going through it. But this is by far not the most efficient way to practice. The brain science behind it is that we basically get good at doing whatever we're doing. So when you're practicing, you get good at doing whatever you're playing. So if you're playing through something and making mistakes occasionally, you may go back and fix it. So you've maybe gone through it and like on one spot you made a mistake on it once, and then you fixed it and did it right once. So you have sort of 50-50, one time you did it wrong, one time you did it right, and then you just keep working your way through it, and that's basically how it goes. There's a lot of sections you do right, and then some sections where you have like a 50-50 mistake and then correction. The thing is, then your brain gets equally good at making a mistake as it does at doing it right. So when we're practicing, the goal should be to do it as correct as possible, as many times as possible. Now this may seem like a really extreme goal and really hard, and it's basically asking you to be perfect, which is impossible. And that's why we need to practice, is because we can't just do it 100% perfect every time. But something that's interesting with the brain science is that it doesn't necessarily have to be at the tempo, so going slower will still get it ingrained in your brain properly. And also you can do different things to like group things differently, so it feels a little bit different and isn't exactly the same, but you're still doing it correctly and still building in the muscle memory. That's where things like different practice rhythms and dotted rhythms, where you take like a 16th note run, and instead of going perfectly steady, 1 E and a 2 E and a, you can sort of do like a dotted rhythms, 1 E and a 2 E and a 1 E and da 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 da, or you can do that backwards, da 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 da, so that you're changing the grouping, and that helps your brain actually get it down. Even though you're technically doing something a little different, you're still getting the notes in the right order, and that's what your brain remembers. So you want to be doing as much of that correctly as possible. And that's sort of the reason why we have these different practice techniques, is to have different ways of going about something, so we're still doing it correctly and being intentional and getting the effects that we want, but we're doing it in different ways to make it easier for us to get it correct. And that's my biggest and favorite advice when you're practicing, is to simplify things. So if you have this big scary 16th note run or like a whole measure of really fast rhythm, the best thing to do first is to slow it down. That's the easiest way to simplify it. Another way to simplify it is to break it into different groups or different chunks. So maybe instead of going 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4, you can go 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1, and break it into different groups, or do like the different dotted rhythms. Instead of 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4, it's 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1, and changing up the rhythm to make it a little bit easier because you're grouping things, or just going 2 notes at a time. I like too. So it's 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4. So you're still moving your fingers fast and getting that fast practice in, but your brain has enough time to think about where you're going. So that's another category of ways to simplify things. Slowing it down is the most important and the best place to start, and then changing the groupings is another way to do it. And the last category of simplifying things is just isolating things. So if you have a particular interval that's tricky, you can isolate that and work it out and figure out how to do that. Or even when you're just taking that 16th note passage out of the whole piece, that's an example of isolating too. So we want to simplify things so that we can do it really precisely and really perfectly, so that when we're going through everything, we're practicing really efficiently. So if the first way of practicing inefficiently is sort of getting out the piece, running through it, when you make a mistake, just going back and fixing it once and then continuing on, a more efficient way of practicing would be to look at a piece, identify where the hard parts are, and then isolate those hard parts and make sure that you're improving those hard parts and figuring out how to do them correctly. And then you can integrate it and put it back into context and do it all through smoothly and consistent. So that's what I like to call the 3 I's of practicing. The first I is to identify what's difficult. The second I is to isolate it and improve it. And then the third I is to integrate it, so you put everything back in context. So again, looking through that, you look at what's hard and then isolate it and do those different practice techniques I talked about to simplify it, make it easier, and make sure that you're doing it correctly as many times as possible. And when you're isolating and improving, really the best way to improve is just getting those repetitions in. So whether it's slow or other kind of simplification, just make sure that you're getting those repetitions in and really learning it and doing it as close to 100% perfect as you can most of the time, even if 100% perfect is a little bit under tempo or a lot of it under tempo. Going slow is good. And then the final step is to integrate, which means to make sure that you can play through that passage when you're doing it in the context of the piece. So maybe going back to the beginning of that bigger section in the piece, or maybe doing the whole piece all together and making sure that when you get to that trickier part that you've identified, that you're able to work through it and make sure that it goes as well as it did when you were isolating it. Using the 3 I's of practicing, I think, is the best way to really leverage the brain science to improve and practice as efficiently as possible. That's really what the science tells us, is that doing it properly is what we'll get good at. So you want to make sure that you're doing it correctly as many times as possible, and that you have a lot more repetitions with it going exactly the way you want than repetitions with any kinds of mistakes. Because if you're doing a mistake and then fixing it once, then you have equally gotten good at making the mistake as you have at doing it properly. So always be really conscious of if you're doing mistakes or not mistakes, and make sure that as you go along, you're being efficient and doing it the way that you want. I hope the 3 I's of practicing help you to make your practicing more efficient, and I wish you the best of luck as you try to improve through any different things that you might be challenged with in your music, and good luck to your continued improvement playing, and I will see you in another video. Thanks so much for watching.